The nights are cold. It's late October here in Minnesota, and that means it's time for fall mushrooms. So, one of my favorite cold weather mushrooms is the brickcap or Hypholoma sublateritium. And these are a kind of obscure mushroom. I don't see a lot of people picking these, and that's kind of no surprise. If you look at older guidebooks, a lot of them are going to say that these are inedible. Some of them will say they're edible, like David Aurora does. And one thing to take into consideration here is that these are related to wine caps. Wine caps, some people can't tolerate them. Same thing with brick caps. Here is what we're going to go over: a little harvesting and ID. We're going to go over some lookalikes because there definitely are some lookalikes. These are an intermediate mushroom, trimming and processing, and some general cooking. So when you see these mushrooms, these are going to be, they're saprobes, and they're going to be growing on deciduous stumps. And a lot of times they're going to be in kind of these big, kind of tight clusters. And you can see here, they kind of shaggy looking stems when you look up close, and gray gills at maturity, reminiscent of wine cap mushrooms if you have worked with wine cap mushrooms before. Unlike the wine caps, they have this kind of mottled cap color, and that comes from their natural spore print. When I'm harvesting them, these are mature. They're okay. They're not as good as the young ones, which we'll see too. I'm just going to trim the stems and put those in a basket. And these can be nice and clean because they're going to be growing from wood and not, right in the dirt. Obviously, you do want to be careful when you're trimming them so you don't get dirt in the gills. But these smaller ones, the larger ones, these ones are not growing in a tight cluster. Those are all going to be fine. I may dehydrate the older ones. These are kind of the choice ones here. The ones where they don't have, the caps are not opened yet and they're still nice and tight. They're going to have a, kind of a perfectly pearly white stem. One of the most important things is to learn to identify them at different stages of growth. So you can see here, look at how different these mushrooms can look from when they are very young to when they are at maturity. And that mottled cap color from that natural spore print is one of the kind of keys for identification here. I just love that kind of color palette. It's really just a color palette that only nature could create. Another thing you'll see with the younger mushrooms, you can see the remnants of a partial veil that's going to cover the gills. So now you can see those. Here's the gills of the mushrooms when they're older compared to when they're younger. You can see you're not going to see veil remnants when the mushrooms are mature, when they have the gray or kind of purplish gray gills. Okay, now lookalikes. There are a few. First one, this is edible. This is Hypholoma capnoides, and this one only grows in conifer woods. So that's growing on a red pine stump in northern Minnesota. And this has more of a bell-shaped cap, and it has more of kind of like a yellow bell-shaped cap. And that one more looks like the one that you really don't want to eat. One of two, which is the sulphur tuft or Hypholoma fasciculare. And this one has kind of a yellowish green cap and kind of brown gills. And this can grow right next to the brick cap, and those are poisonous, so you do not want to eat those. Then, of course, we have Galerina marginata, also known as the funeral bell. These are a lot smaller, but they also grow on decaying hardwoods. They will typically have a little ring around their stem. They're smaller, but you definitely want to make sure you don't eat those. So yes, intermediate mushroom here, but nothing that's insurmountable. Trimming and processing. So the best part of these mushrooms, just like with wine caps, is the cap. And with these kind of more mature mushrooms, I'm going to trim those up just because the stem can be a little bit chewy, and I don't really want that. The best part is the cap here. And with these mature mushrooms, I'm also going to save plenty of those for dehydrating. You can see I'm saving the really young, perfect mushrooms there for soup right at the top. And those young ones, those are really the cherry. Those are really what you want. The older mushrooms, they can kind of get thin flesh as they age, just like wine caps. So I do like to dehydrate those. And when I'm storing them, these can get kind of brittle too. So I like to store them in a hard-sided plastic container in the fridge with a dry towel. You don't want to store them in a paper bag because that will make them dry out, but it can be good for, say, like 24 hours. Just stack them up. After you take the stems off, they will be kind of easier. They'll be easier to store. Pack them in there, put a lid on, and then I'll remove that lid, once a day and let them breathe. Now for drying, I'm going to just cut them into pieces. You could cut them into slices, you could cut them into quarters, but I am removing that stem because the stem is just a little more tough and the cap is really what we want here. But these do dry very well, just like wine caps. And unlike wine caps, they're not going to really stain the food that you make. Wine caps can kind of make dishes look a little dark and strange. Now for general cooking, it's totally fine to just throw these in a pan and saute them. Make sure to cook them thoroughly. For an example, if I have a whole bunch of small caps, I might make a simple brick cap pasta. This is just a pasta aglio olio, so garlic and oil. And I went over this in my video on oyster mushroom pastas a couple weeks ago. We slice the garlic paper thin. And how we cook the mushrooms here, we want to make sure we thoroughly cook these. So we're going to cook the mushrooms first. We're going to cook the pasta in 2 stages here. First thing we're going to do is get some oil hot in a pan. I like a stainless steel pan. Here it's going to leave some brown bits in the pan that are going to kind of add a little bit to kind of make a little pan sauce. And we're just going to heat the mushrooms until they're nice and wilted and they've got some color on them and we have evaporated all the water. You'll see what that looks like here. Just keep cooking the mushrooms until they're nice and wilted. And then eventually, you can add a little bit more oil if you need. They may soak up plenty of oil. Now you can see the mushrooms are getting nice and cooked and we have some good brown bits going in the pan here. That's something you're really going to get with stainless steel. Now add a little bit of wine out of the frame there and that deglazes the pan. See all those delicious brown bits make kind of a little bit of a sauce. Then we'll season them with salt. And then we're going to take the mushrooms out of the pan because it could be kind of tricky to cook the garlic if we just added it right to the pan. And I'm going to want to clean that up. You see the pan is still kind of cooking, so add a little bit of wine or you could add a splash of chicken stock. Just clean that up, get all those brown bits off and add those to the mushrooms. Just pour those right in there. Now we're going to cook the pasta just like I would normally. So we add the garlic to some oil, and then we cook the garlic slowly until it gets nice and kind of golden around the edges. And anchovy paste is optional. It does add a really nice little umami. It doesn't taste fishy, but just a tiny little bit if you want. Totally optional. But just keep cooking that garlic nice and slow. Now we'll add just a little bit, like a 1/4 teaspoon of anchovy paste. And then hot chili flakes, definitely recommended here. You got to add those. Then we're going to add our mushrooms and we'll add the pasta. And then we're just going to cook everything together for a little bit. Add some parsley and chives, maybe a little bit of thyme if I have some. And we just heat that up. See, the pasta's been pre-cooked. That's just like at a restaurant. We just toss it in there. And, this is an oil-based sauce. There's no cream or anything. And traditionally, there's not even any cheese. But it's totally fine to add cheese. And just like all the other pastas I've shown you how to make, we twist those noodles into the bowl and kind of mound them up. And just put all of the goodies right on top there. Very simple, very good. And just a really clean, simple way to enjoy a nice little pile of brick caps. Now, another thing is just soup. So you can see the finest mushrooms, those really small, nice, perfect ones. I've saved these for soup that I'm going to make with a little bit of enoki mushrooms. So I just trim the stems up a little bit so that the mushrooms can fit on the spoon. And with these younger mushrooms, I do like to eat the stem. I'll add the stem with them, where with the older ones, I may discard it or dehydrate it. And, you can pack a lot of these into a little bowl of soup and the texture is great. So we're using the whole caps here because they're nice and young. Really great way to enjoy their texture. I just add a little bit of watercress and I'm going to serve it with a little bit of chili crisp. Just look at that broth. A little bit of homemade chicken stock. I mean, you don't have to get complicated with these mushrooms. Just kind of let them do what they want to do. A little bit of chili crisp and, that's a great, simple dish. There you go. Just kind of a quick breakdown on brick cap mushrooms, things you need to know, and a few ways I might like to cook them. Recipes are on my website, along with a lot more information. There's a link at the top of the video description for that. Thanks for watching.